What is that John Lennon said? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Was that
Yes.
John Lennon? Yeah. Hey, you know what I need to do, and this is almost me exposing my weakness and being a slave to you out there who's listening to this. You shared a great experience where you jumped in and you got to bathe and wash away your own filth because you're in a boat for 9 days. But then if we go to the other end of the spectrum, and I do want to hear it as well, as long as the listening, as well as the listening audience, want to hear these type of stories, such as maybe the weakness in human psychology. But we want to hear the scariest thing that happened to you, like of all those. Let's just stay with the two rowing adventures, because I imagine climbing Everest would have had its share, and climbing those hills mountains, excuse me, would have had its share. But we just stay with the rowing. Was there a night that sort of separates itself from all others where you went, holy cow, now I'm really up for a challenge? And maybe you were yelling to the ocean that night saying, come on, is this all you got? Whatever. Was there an experience?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's two that there's one that sticks out from each row. So two major storms. The first one was day 14 of my first transatlantic row. Um, I I was this began at about 6 o'clock in the morning, where I was fast asleep in the cabin. So the cabins are about 2 meters long. So I have about 3 centimeters, 4 centimeters of room between my feet on one end and my head on the other. So I'm fast asleep in this little cabin, and I wake up when my head smashes against the side of the cabin because a huge wave has hit the side of the boat and literally lifted me up while I was asleep and propelled me into the side of the cabin. Now it's only about a foot, but literally it shot me a foot across the cabin, and that's how I woke up. That's how I was kind of came out of that unconscious state, right? Um, Meanwhile, the boat is going 360 degrees
Oh,
over during a capsize because the power of that wave had just thrown it over. So I'm trying to figure out what the hell's happened, what's this pain, and what are all these like. So when you go on a capsize, there's quite a bit of paraphernalia that you need for everyday usage in storage down the side of the cabin. So that's all over the place. The bedding is all over me, the vinyl mattress, and there's I remember feeling some kind of water on the bottom of my feet, or sorry, on the bottoms of my or the back of my calf. So you can imagine trying to decipher in those moments what the hell is happening. So um, the boat self-rights itself. They're designed to self-right, the ocean rowing boat. And then it was just, I figured, then I kind of had almost like a memory jog that like the liquid that I could feel on my tongue at this point was blood, from rugby, because you'd be quite, you know, aware and you'd know what blood feels like, the warmth of the sensation on your skin and the taste of it, obviously, when it hits your mouth. So I was like, you're bleeding, oh, you've capsized. And then it was very much a case of like, well, okay, what you need to do, you need to firstly stop the bleeding, and then once that's done, then there's the next job to do, whatever that might be. And that ended up in just to um kind of try and remedy the cabin, make sure that the water that had come in, there wasn't some sort of ingress, and then outside onto deck. And when I opened the cabin, so I was able to stop the bleeding pretty lively because there was no real depth to the cuts, thankfully. But then when I opened the cabin hatch, all I saw was water. I was like, fuck, like, am I sinking? What the hell's happening? And it just was a consequence of the wave that had come over the top, and then the water that had been kind of almost scooped out of the ocean from the capsize. And then I saw the life raft kind of hanging over the side, the chain anchor, and the seat kind of half. So I had to grab them in quickly. Now remember, I'm in like 9, 10 meter waves here. So the
wow.
boat is still going up these huge faces and down and up and down, and the wind and howling. It's like a proper storm. So you can imagine there was a lot of like hyper alertness and survival instincts happening. And while I call this the craziest day of my life, and I think you're going to understand why. Well, that's how it started. So I got the cabin remedied. I got the water off, pumped the water off the deck, bucketed it off, and I'm kind of sitting there. I was on the rowing seat, um, contemplating, like almost in a minor state of shock, like, fuck, what just fucking happened? And I hear this noise to my right, and you're on it like a shot. Like anything that's different, you're so hyper aware to your senses that like I was on it, and I looked over, and there was a dorsal fin swimming towards the boat, and it was a whale, and the whale went round the
Wow.
boat, like round the boat a second time, round the boat a third time, round the boat a fourth time, and on the fourth time, the fourth rotation, as it got to my right hand side, it stuck its head up out of the water and looked at me with its left eye. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I was no, nobody's gonna believe this
Wow.
is like something, because we're still in a storm, like, and and then came round after that. It came right round, as close as you can get to the boat, like so much so if I had had the wherewithal, I could have reached out and touched its dorsal fin, and then went down the left hand side of the boat, and then I never saw it again. Even though throughout that day, I kept imagining, or at least perceiving, that I could see the dorsal fin in the distance, and it was. I suppose what I felt afterwards was that it might be some type of coping mechanism, to feel a little bit safer then, because I was so exposed, on a few different levels. But yeah, about 6 hours after that, then
There's
I
more.
capsized. I capsized the second time, um, and this was a case of I was on the deck, and off the back of the first capsize, I was having a lot of trouble with the steering on the boat. So the steering on the boat is foot steering. So at the bottom, on the base of your left foot, there's a little paddle and turns left or right, and that moves the rudder at the back of the boat, right and left. And it felt like, the best analogy I can give is, it felt like a car without power steering. So when I'd move the foot paddle, sorry, it had no effect on the boat. Like it wouldn't move, it wouldn't make any reaction. So what I had done is I got up out of my seating, where I was seated to row, and I was trying to figure out what the problem was. It was really frustrating because I had no control then in those big, huge waves, which meant that the boat was like sitting underneath the break of the waves. So it was very, very vulnerable to another capsize, which happened while I was trying to get in underneath the foot mechanism, paddle mechanism, and then
Oh,
I just caught this left out of my corner of my right eye, this blue and white kind of flash, and I knew, like, I just on some level I was like, that's a breaking wave, and just instinctually I reached behind me, because there was a handle on the what they call the bulkhead, the cabin face, and I just never just total instincts just grabbed that, and I went in. The boat was capsized again, and I went into the water, hanging onto the boat with one hand, and I went the full 180 degrees underneath the water, hanging on with
wow.
one hand, and I was incredibly calm and incredibly in control and incredibly it was a peaceful experience when it should have been absolute chaos. Like I should have been panicked, and I wasn't, because I'd prepared for that. I'd visualized capsize coming. I'd visualized myself, um, that what I would do if that happened, and I knew I had one thing to do, and that was just to squeeze my grip. So the minute I hit that water, my mind went to one thing, and it just kept saying to me, "Squeeze your grip, squeeze your
Mm.
grip, squeeze your grip." And it only took 7 or 8 seconds, and I got the boat went to full 360, and I kind of got lassoed out of the water, or kind of, pulled up out of the water with the power of the self right, and kind of got thrown back onto deck, still clutching that handle with my kind of head on the deck and my feet over my head. And I just remember thinking, fucking hell, I can't believe that, like, that worked, that the the visualization that I had done, the preparation, like you know, you hope, right? There's no like Google search here, like how do I avoid or how do I mitigate like against the capsize or what? So I was just using the powers of my imagination and trying to figure out what I would do. And then all of a sudden, everything came to pass. And what I had practiced had worked incredibly well. Um, and there I was on deck, a very, very relieved man. And yeah, so that
Wow.
is day 14, the craziest day of my life in on my first ocean row.